Are Belle and Wise doomed to fall just because the name Phaethon already carries with that expectation? Or are they Phaethon because they are the only ones brave enough to take the sun, fully knowing the heat could kill them? Kit, what the fuck are you talking about? No, hear me out. You see, I haven't really made or even thought of doing analysis on main characters from Hoyo games before because it's quite challenging. Maybe it's a skill issue, but mostly because their story isn't finished and wrapped up in one single arc. So it's tricky for me to pin down when the story is still building them as we go. However, I guess the MCs in ZZZ are interesting to dive into because they are heavily inspired by Greek mythology. And this strongly implies that the devs dropped massive hints of what lies ahead of them. Of course, it's a popular theory among the community how they're going to bring destruction, especially with how more daring they've become and overestimating their own capabilities. But I'm not here to make wild theories about the plot when most of it has already been said before. What I'm more interested in is the problem that lies within this expected tragedy, because I think it makes us judge them a little too early and ends up overlooking another side of the story. We get so fixated on when and how they'll fall, and we sort of narrowed our view of what the narrative is actually trying to convey. Because I firmly believe it goes beyond recycling a famous cautionary tale about arrogance and instead offers a complex look at virtues and vulnerabilities. Is choice considered correct only when it succeeds? At what point does courage become recklessness? If you're ready for a yap session, please get seated. And welcome to the Phaethon Analysis. Belle and Wise are siblings that run a small video rental store on 6th Street called Random Play. Some may believe that is just for money laundering because behind the store, they secretly operate as Phaethon, a legendary proxy in New Eridu. Some basic info for those out of the loop. Proxies are professional guides for hollow explorers, since hollows are distorted mazes that are easily to get lost in. While proxies are reputable and not that hard to commission them, they're still kinda illegal. And by kinda, it's due to the fact that they're not officially accredited by the city administration. However, in some circumstances, they still get hired by high-ranking officials because they work outside the law and deal with jobs too shady to go through legal channels. Belle and Wise are given the legendary rank because they possess the Hollow Deep Dive system, also known as HDD. It's an advanced technology that makes it possible to communicate from inside the hollows to the outside, which normally can't be done. With the HDD, they can remotely control their bamboo in the hollow from a safe area like a drone. The downside of this device is that it takes a lot of their body capacity, suppressing their innate ether aptitude, which means it's not possible for them to enter the hollows themselves without risking lethal corruption in a short amount of time. Despite this, a lot of why Belle and Wise became proxies goes back before the fall of the old capital. Back then, they were the students of Carol Arna, an advanced research director at Helios Academy. They were raised and taught by her until the disaster took away almost everything overnight. Since they were still so young, all they really remembered was being attacked by unknown forces and Carol saving them before she was taken away by a giant, creepy hand. What Carol left behind was the HDD system she invented, her bamboo EOS, and the eye implants within each sibling, all connected to the HDD. Even now, the true nature of that power remains unknown, though it is said to be her gift to them. According to public statements, the fall of the old capital was caused by Hollow Zero's sudden rapid expansion, and Carol Arna was blamed as the main culprit. Believing that she was innocent, Belle and Wise swore on their own lives to uncover the truth and clear out her name. And so, becoming proxies let them gather the hollow data they needed. To them, somewhere deep inside Hollow Zero must hold the clues that would eventually lead them back to their teacher. Hi, just a little interruption. If you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who also enjoys overthinking fictional people. Videos like this take a ton of research, writing, and editing to put together, and your support is literally what allows me to keep making them. Thank you so much, and back to the video. At the beginning of the prologue, we're shown that Phaethon's Internet account has been hacked. Given no other choice, they reported the account information to the public security, resulting in a huge loss on their previously compiled holo data. Despite being unable to use the Phaethon account anymore, Belle and Wise's reputation still carried over, even if they had to start from scratch. From then on, they quickly rose through the ranks, thanks to Fairy, an AI assistant that provided them with real-time holo data. And later, after the HDD was upgraded with the mayor's help, they were finally able to enter the holo themselves. We're not going through the entire plot, but as the story progresses, the siblings grow more and more confident in taking on increasingly dangerous holo missions. Like, we're talking about classified operations on a military level. And here is the thing, in the holos, getting lost is the least thing one should be worried about. For one, the air is polluted with ether, which is highly lethal with prolonged exposure. And second, ethereals could attack you before you even realize you're lost. So clearly, anyone going out there to explore would need to be athletic enough to run for their life and have at least basic combat skills to defend themselves. Unfortunately, the siblings have neither of these qualities. The only reason they managed to survive attacks, whether from humans or ethereals, was because other agents were there to protect them. Almost in every scene, they did end up like damsels in distress. Regardless, none of these threats stopped them from pressing deeper into danger. In fact, they be doing whatever with the sheer power of friendship, maybe adding a little thoughts and prayers in there as they risk their own lives. I have to agree, the writing is hilarious and maybe a little ridiculous sometimes, but it's also understandable to see why some people argue that their growing overconfidence is both intentional and necessary for the story before the inevitable fall. With that said, I think it's worth turning to Phaethon's myth a little more carefully instead of reducing it to a quick summary. I believe not everyone is going to be familiar with the full story, and in this case that matters because some of the details carry more meaning than they first appear to. Phaethon, whose name means shining, was the son of Helios, the god who drives the sun across the sky every day. But his childhood friend, Epiphas, the son of Zeus and Io, mocked Phaethon's claim that he too was of divine descent. Stung by the insult, Phaethon went to his mother, Clymene, and asked for proof that his father really was the sun god. And his mother replied like a normal parent would, "Go and ask your father." The sun's palace was described as so absurdly bright that barely any mortal could have endured it. Even Phaethon himself struggled. He often paused, as his eyes dazzled by all the gold and fire-like brilliance around him. Still, he kept going, driven by his purpose. When he reached the throne room, the radiance was even more overwhelming that he had no choice but to stop. Seeing the frightened boy before him, Helios kindly asked what had brought him to this palace. When Phaethon confessed that he had been mocked and needed proof that he was truly his son, Helios lowered his radiant crown so the boy could finally face him without being blinded. Helios immediately recognized him as his son, and as proof, he swore an oath that he would grant him anything. And unfortunately, it backfired him when Phaethon asked to drive the sun chariot for a single day. Helios immediately regretted his oath. He warns Phaethon repeatedly, "The road is treacherous. The horses are barely controllable, and the whole thing is way beyond what any mortal could do." Even Helios himself admits it fills him with fear. Above all, not even the gods can do it properly. If even Zeus cannot drive the chariot, what chance does he have? Helios begs Phaethon to ask for anything else, and even tells him that his fear for him alone should be enough proof that he is his son. But none of those fazed Phaethon to change his mind. At dawn, Phaethon took the reins. Reluctantly, his father rubbed his face with a sacred ointment to protect him from the flames, set his rays upon the boy's head, and gave him final instructions on how to survive the ride. "Spare the whip. Hold the reins tight. Do not fly too high and do not sink too low. Stay on the middle path." And so Phaethon took off after thanking his father. For a brief moment, he stood proud, but the illusion did not last long. The horses felt the chariot's weight was lighter and thought it was empty, so they bolted. From there, it all went hell very quickly. Horrified by the monsters he saw and unable to control the horses any longer, Phaethon let go of the reins. The chariot shot too high, scorching the heavens, then plunged too low and set the earth on fire instead. Mountains burned, rivers dried up, cities fell, and whole nations were reduced to ash. And when the destruction became too much for the world to bear, the earth itself cried out for help. In the end, Zeus struck Phaethon down with a thunderbolt. Phaethon fell from the sky in flames, his body cast down into the river Eridanus below. It was a brutal, foreseen ending, but the tragedy does not end with Phaethon himself. His sisters mourn by the river until they are turned into poplar trees, their tears hardening into amber as they keep grieving him. He was also mourned by his beloved, Cycnus, who kept diving into the waters until he was turned into a swan. Even Helios was shattered by the loss. He came to hate the light, and even himself, as grief curdled into anger. Refusing to drive the sun chariot, he challenged Zeus to take the reins himself, crying out that Phaethon did not deserve to be killed for failing at a task no one else could master. All the gods pleaded with Helios not to leave the world in darkness, while Zeus tried to defend what he had done and threaten him. Still overwhelmed with terror and grief, Helios rounded up the horses and struck them with a whip, blaming them for his son's death. Now, if we compare the two, both Phaethons share a lot more similarities beyond arrogance and their expected tragedy. First off, both Phaethons are mere mortals. Greek myth Phaethon may be the son of Helios, but that did not prevent him from being outmatched by the wild horses on the sun's chariot. Similarly, despite Belle and Wise being known to carry the legacy of Helios Academy, they are still ordinary human beings. We've seen countless times that on their own, they are pretty much helpless against violent threats and dangers that overpower them. Their early dependence on Eos already says a lot that they rely on external assistance. So far, whatever is awakening inside them seems far too unstable for them to bear, and is already taking a toll on their bodies. And the recent reveal of either other Pyrois adds another layer to that parallel, especially since the names of their hollow exploration assistants are adapted from the horses that pull the sun's chariot. Whether the siblings can keep these forces in check or end up being undone by them is something only time will tell. Another thing they share is that both of them are basically navigators. Phaethon is literally trying to steer the sun chariot across the sky, while Belle and Wise guide people through the hollows as proxies. In both cases, they are responsible for directing the route through dangerous places, which means there is more at stake than just their own safety. If they ever lose control, then other people will suffer too. And neither of them is doing all this for no reason. Phaethon wants proof that he really is Helios' son after being bullied for it. So a lot of his actions come from wounded pride and the need to be taken seriously. Belle and Wise are also driven from a deeply personal place. They want the truth and they want to clear Carol Arna's name no matter what it takes. Both of them are seeking honor. And finally, what they seem to share most strongly is courage. Phaethon dares to take the reins of something even gods cannot master, which is disastrous but still undeniably bold. Meanwhile, the siblings keep throwing themselves into missions they are clearly not built for. Now, this is where things do get messy, because these actions do reflect bravery, but it can look a lot like recklessness when it starts going too far. where do we draw that line? Before we try to answer that question, let's talk a little more about what Phaethon's mythology teaches us, and how do these lessons might apply to our Phaethon in ZZZ. Most analysis of the myth usually ends up sounding like a list of warnings. Don't be this, don't be that, but one that strikes me most and seems to cover all those smaller lessons anyway is that too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Indeed, the myth does remind us about moderation, especially through Helios's warning to stay on the middle path. But it's also telling that Phaethon's strengths are also his vulnerabilities. His determination to prove himself is what pushes him all the way to the sun's palace, gives him the courage to stand before Helios, and makes him bold enough to ask for the ultimate proof. But that same determination is also what stops him from listening when he is warned repeatedly that the chariot is beyond him. Eventually, the traits that make him compelling is also the ones that ruined him. So rather than just a cautionary tale about arrogance, the myth shows us what happens when good traits are pushed too far. And this brings us back to our previous question. How do we determine if a positive trait, or what we also call virtue, becomes a bit too much and turns harmful? Well, thankfully, someone sort of figured it out how to approach this dilemma. In classic philosophy, Aristotle came up with a concept of the golden mean. He argued that virtue is about finding a balance between excess and deficiency. For example, courage is a good thing, but too much of it can turn into recklessness, while too little becomes cowardice. In this perspective, we can view traits, even for our own, not as inherently good or bad, but just as they are. As Aristotle said, these traits are good because people are just using it well. And most importantly, it is called the golden mean because virtue doesn't lie exactly in the middle. Sometimes it's more of a sweet spot that sits closer to one of the extremes. Now, returning to our proxies, we can use this idea to analyze their character even deeper and perhaps identify which qualities that may contribute to their fall. One of Phaethon's main strengths in ZZZ is their ability to build mutual trust. Even though they understand that everyone in New Eridu has their own agenda, they remain pragmatic in the way they build relationships instead of becoming completely cynical. It's why they have connections with so many people, especially those in positions of power. Not to mention, we even have trust events. So the story and game revolves around forming close bonds. These connections give them access and protection which almost no illegal proxy should have, while maintaining their secret identity as Phaethon. And most of all, these connections help them to find clues about their teacher. Now, I know it wouldn't be fair to say they're turning gullible because the mayor is basically playing 5D chess on them, and the siblings have always remained vigilant. But perhaps they've gotten way too comfortable with how easy it is for them to make allies. Because we have already seen this same trust cause them to be played by Ramiel. Before, they had every reason to be suspicious of her. Not only they became direct competitors, but Ramiel admitted she was cheating. The whole conversation about trusting too easily should have been a massive hint to follow their intuition. Yet, Phaethon decided to be nice, helping to fix her ethereal card and even spilled some unnecessary tea. And this has become one of Phaethon's flaws. They give away their leverage so easily and expose themselves to betrayal because they assume everyone plays by their moral rules. And this doesn't just apply to enemies or strangers. It also extends to the bonds they have already built. Take Fairy, for instance, who is constantly by their side and yet still largely a mystery to them. Or consider Krampus, whose relationship with Phaethon keeps getting teased as something that could take a dark turn. And as of now, it's obvious that almost everyone knows their real identity, except Seth. Probably. But essentially, the trust Phaethon extends so freely today could easily become the weapon someone uses against them tomorrow if they don't keep their guard up. Confidence is another strength of the siblings that is slowly becoming a liability. For a long time, their physical limitation to enter the hollows wasn't a reason for them to be insecure. In fact, they know they are brilliant navigators and use the HDD system to safely guide agents and finish commissions no matter how dire the situation is. Even in the beginning, they would have just quit being proxies the moment their original account was wiped out, but they still managed to pull through. They just lost their account, but not their identity. As the plot rises, they also get a massive ego boost. The story is intentionally beating their pride to make them feel like the main characters. They haven't completely crossed the line into hubris yet, but the foundation for it is already carefully laid, with every mission that always ends up suspiciously well, and outcomes that keep working in their favor, pushing them closer to that edge. And finally, their courage is what drives the entire narrative. Time and time again, the story shows them trying to save others when no one else will. Look at their desperation to save Yidari, or what they were willing to endure for Xiaoguang. It's admirable, but at the same time, we can see how that heroism is becoming more and more irresponsible. They throw themselves into highly dangerous situations, mistaking their luck and past survival for invincibility. Or is that not the case? What I've just explained is basically what the majority is probably thinking. Because here's where I'll have to address a problem. What we've analyzed so far is strictly allocating when traits can be good in theory. And I admit it has potential biases to it, such as labeling Phaethon being reckless when that might not be the actual case. So if I ask again, when does confidence become arrogance? None of us can really agree to one universal answer, because that's the point. Aristotle acknowledges that finding the golden mean isn't easy, especially when we practice it in real life. For example, anger isn't inherently bad. When channeled correctly, anger is the fuel we need to stand up for ourselves and protect others. But as humans, we are shaped by all kinds of emotions and complexities that often pull us away from making rational choices. The same logic can also apply to the virtues. And even more, there's going to be people on the extremes who will completely disagree with you. In Aristotle's view, a coward may see someone brave as being reckless, and a reckless person might call the same brave person a coward. And it goes the same way in every other case. We all sort of have our own scales about what makes a trait good. So whenever we judge Phaethon's decisions, we might just be projecting our own limits onto them. The truth is, we can never truly be objective. I say this because there is one last part of Phaethon's myth that I purposely left out because it flips the narrative and makes us rethink everything we've just discussed. At the end of Phaethon's fall, the nymphs pitied him, buried his body, and carved a verse on his tomb. Here lies Phaethon, who drove the sun's god's car. Greatly he failed, but he had greatly dared. And interestingly, this famous epitaph also appears in the lore teaser video. More than just a reference, it feels like a caution for how we should interpret the story. In mythology, there's multiple versions of it, but they all point to the same thing. The epitaph changes the tone of the myth, reframing Phaethon from being a foolish kid who got what he deserved into a tragic figure of ambition. This reflects the idea that to miss a high aim is to fail without shame, where reaching too far is not a simple failure, but a necessary part of striving for something greater. And when you look at Ovid's original text, Phaethon was deeply loved. Not only the nymphs felt bad for his fate, but his family mourned him intensely. His dear sickness left behind the kingdom he ruled and grieved him endlessly. Even Helios was in rage and sorrow that he abandoned his cosmic duties. If Phaethon was all about an arrogant boy who met his tragedy, the story should have highlighted his shame. Then why won't the writer go out of their way emphasizing the immense pity surrounding Phaethon? Look at Helios' argument against the other gods, pointing out that failing a task no one else can do does not deserve such punishment. Every detail reframes the entire narrative. Phaethon did not just fail because he was an idiot. He failed because he was also brave enough to attempt the impossible. Another striking element is how vividly this story is described. The blinding palace, the terrifying dangers of the sun chariot, and the catastrophic fall. The text acknowledges Phaethon's fear, like he's not some psycho, but it still proves his boldness. It gives the sense that the writer isn't just looking down on Phaethon as a fool. Ovid seems genuinely fascinated by how grand the attempt was, even while fearing how disastrously it could end. So, if recklessness is what it takes to reach for the impossible, is it really such a bad thing? Our issue again lies in how the middle way of virtue is ideal, but finding that perfect balance is something unrealistic to real-world circumstances. Therefore, Aristotle proposed that since one extreme is always worse than the other, we must lean toward the less bad side of the equation. Then, I would argue defining bad is subjective and still up for anyone to decide. So, in Phaethon's case, perhaps reckless ambition might just be a better flaw than becoming a coward who tries nothing at all. You might argue that his motive seems kinda stupid. He nearly burned the world to ashes just because some kids at school bullied him. Like, none of this could have happened if he ignored it. But beneath that pride lies something deeply universal: the human struggle over identity and honor. When people are wronged or silenced, they often go to extreme, even terrifying lengths to fight back. Imagine being falsely accused of something terrible. Imagine experiencing injustice that strips away who you are. Would you let it slide to keep the peace? For most people, the answer is no. The setup may be trivial for the story's sake, but all Phaethon ever wanted was to prove himself to be taken seriously, and that purpose outweighed the dangers he faced. And that refusal to back down lies at the heart of Phaethon in ZZZ. The reason why the siblings keep throwing themselves in amidst the danger is all tied back to their past. Imagine it, being unable to do anything to help their teacher that saved them one night, only to watch her publicly shamed for being guilty of a huge crime. This feeling of helplessness and the fierce determination born from it was actually shown to us right at the start of the game. In the prologue, zzzero expands as Wise says, "In the end, it all comes down to this," hinting that this is the key event everything leads back to. The immediate rewind into Eridu's tragedy, suggesting their present actions are inseparable from the past disaster, which was during the fall of the old capital. The siblings here are framed as powerless witnesses to the catastrophe, looking defeated and unable to stop it. The scene is rendered in a distorted, glitching haze, as though the memory itself is too overwhelming to be remembered clearly, making it feel like it's visualizing a past trauma. At the same time, the visual effect also emphasizes emphasizes the intensity of the collapse is so powerful that it is already gone beyond any point of saving. And what's more, the composition reduces the siblings into small silhouettes in the center, while the disaster takes up almost the entire frame, making it look like they're being erased by the light. Just as how Phaethon's mythology uses a vivid description to amplify the grandeur and terror of his fall, the overall cinematography in this scene highlights the sheer scale of the destruction, making it feel overwhelming to both characters and the audience. But even in that helplessness, there is defiance. The words "I won't give up" appear in the middle of the chaos, showing their refusal to give in even if it's a losing battle. Maybe it's plausible that their resolve comes not from mere confidence, much less arrogance, but from having already faced a moment where they had nothing. And much later, when the siblings reflect on Caesar's attempted sacrifice at Cinder Lake, the game circles back to this old wound.
Although we could only prove the fissure in Cinder Lake exists from its effects, apart from Caesar's bold gamble, there really was no other way to save it. But watching Caesar fall, that feeling of helplessness, I never want to go through that again. Just like that time.
This scene, though easily overlooked, explicitly states what had only been implied before. And this is where their whole deal starts making way more sense. Once we look at them through a different lens, all the insane and reckless decisions they make later doesn't just feel like plot convenience. What really drives them is the fear of repeating the old mistake, becoming the one who cannot do anything to save the people they care about. Of course, there are consequences, but is being reckless the only option to correct a wrong, despite the destruction it might bring? Then again, what we label as reckless might actually be the exact amount of courage required for the situation. So we can't really come to an agreement on what's the most wise decision in every situation. Then what is the alternative? Doing nothing? But even our inaction doesn't stop the world from moving. We've already seen that staying put doesn't mean no one gets hurt. The reality is that other people aren't going to stop, and disasters will keep unfolding whether we intervene or not, regardless of our choices. We all just have to pick our poison and accept what comes along with it. Lastly, we do have to acknowledge that there are alternate versions of Phaethon's myth. They all have slightly different details. In another account, Phaethon took the chariot without permission. Others say Zeus never even struck him down, and that he just fell out of pure terror. But despite all the change in the details, they always ended up with Phaethon meeting his tragic end. What makes this even more interesting is that the game also brings in Icarus. However, he is not the same person as Phaethon and has his own myth. Phaethon tries to take control of the sun, while Icarus tries to reach for it. Even so, both myths have similar writing and revolve around human ambition pushing past its limits, where both end with the same devastating fall. And by blending these two similar figures sort of strengthens the idea that no matter what version of the story is, every path that reaches toward the sun seems to end in ruin. And this raises a hypothetical question. What if Belle and Wise are fated towards destruction anyways? I am not familiar with the time reverse theory, but hearing about it does add a nuance to it. If they try to change a tragic outcome by doing things differently only to fail over and over again, because that's just how the movie ends, then what is really the point? Well, the game already answers this question for us through a particular movie called Nihility. The plot is about a scientist who predicts a hollow disaster, but no one believed them. So the scientists and their mechanical companion try to stop it themselves. But the movie doesn't end with a heroic victory. In the end, the disaster still happens, the world succumbs to annihilation, and the scientist fails. It's a very depressing story about how the noblest resolve of one individual isn't enough to reverse a fate. Now, tell me that doesn't sound suspiciously familiar? Whether this was a coincidence or not, the scientist's actions become an extension of the siblings, someone who refuses to treat what lies beyond their understanding as an excuse to surrender. In the same way the scientist is dismissed as delusional, Phaethon and the siblings too can be judged as people who are overestimating themselves. But that's only because we are so heavily biased by outcomes. We'll let the final result dictate whether a choice was right or wrong while ignoring the resolve it took to make the attempt. If Phaethon was able to steer the sun's chariot until the end, the title of a legend would completely outshine the arrogance he is known for today. Consequently, our entire perception of Belle and Wise would also change. Then it's pretty obvious, carrying the name Phaethon, or even Icarus, is much more than being destined to fall. It's the courage it takes to fly. The truth may lie in the contradiction the film provokes. It is not about whether success is possible, but whether it is worthwhile. Because ultimately, the value of a fight isn't measured by whether we survive it. As Lycon said, to walk a path you know might lead nowhere, and to see it through the end anyway is a resolve that completely redefines the idea of failure. And that is the underlying lesson about Phaethon. Knowing you're going to fall anyway. Do you fall because you were too terrified to hold the reins? Or do you fall because you dare to drive the sun? It's interesting that the siblings are named Belle and Wise. Across different languages, their names generally translate to things like bell, or like a warning or an alarm, and intelligence or wisdom. These are two exact qualities that the Greek myth Phaethon lacked. He refused to listen to his father's warnings, letting his wounded pride override any more rational thought. So perhaps in this version of the story, they aren't entirely doomed. There is still a chance that this Phaethon has what it takes to survive the scorching sun. Who knows? At the end of the day, I'm not here trying to impose that everyone who thinks otherwise is wrong. I'm just here to bring the other side of the same coin to light. Ancient philosophers may tell us to stay balanced to live a good life, but ZZZ challenges with a question: what does it actually take to achieve that balance? It's true, Belle and Wise are getting more overconfident and reckless, but in a catastrophic world like New Eridu, the only way to change things is to risk being called reckless. Because even if they eventually crash and lose everything, they dare to do what no one else had the courage to try. Phaethon might be heading for a fall, but God, look at how high they flew.